So this is going to be our final panel discussion of the day. I'm going to get my glass of water. And this panel is all about kind of what I could call the Cambrian explosion that has taken place in the Ethereum ecosystem over the last couple of years, right? If you go back 4 years ago, there was Ethereum. And there were also some side chains, but mostly it was just Ethereum, and all the sort of transaction volume that was happening, to the extent that it was happening on the mainnet. Fast forward to today, we are talking about an ecosystem with more than, I think, 50 layer 2 networks, and quite a few layer 3 networks that are starting to show up as well, right? And I know, for example, that EY's Nightfall, Nightfall, which was created by EY, that's going to show up as an L2, and it potentially will show up as L3 on top of selected L2s. So we have this vast and incredibly diverse ecosystem, and I want to talk about what's really happened in this ecosystem and what the implications are for the participants in the ecosystem. And to do that, I've got 3 people that both have very deep stakes in the Ethereum L2 ecosystem, but from very different perspectives. So I've got Teddy Pornpriya, who is one of the co-founders of the Plume network, an actual real-world asset-focused layer 2 network. Secondly, I've got Krzysztof Urbanski from L2 Beat. They're probably the world's leading expert on metrics and understanding the L2 ecosystem. And then thirdly, I've got Igor Mandrigan, who is the the Chief Technical Product Officer and the co-founder of Gateway.fm, which is a major service provider into the ecosystem. So we've got people coming at this from 3 fundamentally different perspectives. And my goal today is to really sort of get a really good understanding of kind of what is going on in this ecosystem, how can you understand and navigate this ecosystem, and that kind of thing. So what I want to start with, and I'm going to start with Teddy. Teddy, first of all, thank you for coming all the way from Mexico for this event. Of course.
Yeah, I couldn't miss this.
Teddy, tell us about the Plume network. Tell us about what it's for, and tell us about how you think about Plume in the context of the L2 ecosystem. And I think your microphone isn't working, so they're giving you a physical one.
Perfect. Hey, does this work? Oh, perfect. Well, thanks again for having me, Paul. I feel like I've seen you all over the world now, from Singapore to Denver just recently, right, and all over Asia. But happy to talk about Plume. I guess maybe I can give like a really brief background. Personally, I started my career in investment banking. Went to work for Coinbase on their ventures team. Worked at a DeFi protocol after, and then worked for Binance, specifically for BNB chain. And that's kind of where I started seeing all these issues in RWAs. I think the biggest issue that I saw at the time was, a lot of RWA builders are very talented, but they were very TradFi focused. And at the end of the day, they were ultimately building on crypto rails. And there was kind of a disconnect in how the market saw their product and how they envisioned building out their company. And so a lot of issues that they asked me to help them solve at Binance were centered around infrastructure, technology, distribution. And to be honest, at a general purpose L1, it's very hard to tackle the needs of these specific niches within crypto. And so after leaving, I teamed up with my co-founders, there's 2 other co-founders, to build essentially Plume, which is a permissionless chain that's basically looking to bring the real world on chain. And I think what makes us different is that we're a permissionless layer with all of the permission aspects that would be needed for more regulated products to come on chain. But I guess to just keep it very high level, there's 3 things we really focus on, right? The first thing is infrastructure and tooling. What we really saw was a lot of these builders, they needed help a bit on the compliance side or a bit on the tokenization side. So what we've done at Plume is built all these different products to help bring these assets on chain, whether it's different esoteric data sets or more tangible physical assets that are more esoteric and alternative in nature that I can talk about later. But I think the biggest question is, once these assets are on chain, how do you get them really into the hands of the right holders, right? There was this issue, and there is this issue in the RWA space that I really saw, which was basically, a lot of folks are tokenizing a bunch of assets, and they think that the end stop is once the assets are on chain, there will be buyers. But it's never really worked that way in crypto. You need to build the narrative, build the story, build your brand, and find these different distribution channels. So on one hand, we help a lot on the go-to-market side, whether it's on, the BD side, community side, marketing side, we have different ecosystem incentives to help bootstrap different RWA vaults, and I can get into that a bit later. Or on the demand side, we have a strategic partnerships team that helps build these different channel partnerships, which is, I guess you can think of them as like B2B or B2B2C, right? Like some of our partners include different custodians, different exchanges, even, a few of our investors are looking to move some money on-chain to invest into treasuries, and the way they see us is more of like a crypto native savings account where, if they have idle stable coins, they can deposit into our vault and we can help them generate yield, but also make use of this static asset in the crypto ecosystem. And I think the third piece, which I kind of just touched upon, is really building a DeFi layer at top, almost like a composability layer. I think, stable coins have, really dominated the scene, I think, over the last few months and even the last few years. And to be honest, it is honestly the best product in crypto, in my opinion. It has the best product market fit, and it is an RWA. But the thing is, no one sees it as an RWA because it's permissionless, it's liquid, it's composable, it flows throughout the ecosystem within the crypto space. And so what we wanted to do was really package our entire chain and all the different products we have into a way that the on-chain audience can understand. Because the on-chain audience today, believe it or not, is still very crypto native and very degen versus super TradFi. So a lot of the TradFi topics that we have and products that we're bringing on, I think initially is harder for them to understand. So by being able to pair these assets and these different products with different lending protocols, with different AMMs, then we can create the use cases that the on-chain audience is used to, and we can really establish an ecosystem of true usage for RWAs. I mean, there's a lot of great institutional products coming on. We have a lot of these institutional partners as well. But if you look at some of the core products like Biddle or Ondo, great products, but there's only 30 to 50 wallet holders, right? And you compare that to something like MakerDAO or DAI or SDAI, there's 100,000 different wallet holders, right? But at the end of the day, it is RWAs under the hood. So on a high level, we're building a chain to really repurpose the definition and the perspective of real-world assets and make it really, more consumable for the everyday audience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Teddy. So that's a little bit of a picture of a particular layer 2 network. I want to switch a little bit now to Christoph. So L2Beat has this kind of overview of the entire ecosystem. And so Christoph, I want to give you a few minutes to talk about kind of what L2Beat does and your sort of perspective across the entire L2 ecosystem for Ethereum.
Yeah, so from my perspective, Ethereum is highly misunderstood. Like something that we've seen recently, especially on Twitter, people don't get what Ethereum really is. And especially that, a lot of people kind of know about crypto, are interested in crypto, but they are only interested, they don't have hands-on experience. And I would like to use an anecdote. More than 2 years ago, when I first played with ChatGPT, literally after 4 hours playing with it, I messaged all the people that I care about and told them, drop your weekend plans, change your plans, and just sit and educate yourself on this tool. Get familiar with this tool, find different ways how to use it, understand how it works and how can you use it, because this will give you a very high leverage into the future. Especially, I especially was insistent on people who were like my family members that were in school. I literally demanded them to do this. And if I can suggest something to all the people that are watching us and listening to us, as I do care about you because you came to listen to us, drop your weekend plans and familiarize yourself with Ethereum and projects built on Ethereum, different L2s like Plume, like Arbitrum, Optimism, zk-Sync, understand how it works, bridge from one network to the other, see the diversity of offerings in those ecosystems. Because if you are a target audience to this conference, I can guarantee you that there is a team in Ethereum broad L2-centric ecosystem that is working right now, is heavily funded, and is working right now to disrupt your business. I saw it all. I'm present in every major L2 ecosystem. I've been sitting on many grant committees, and I was reviewing hundreds of applications from different teams every 2 months. that were experimenting with different things on top of Ethereum. People think that Ethereum is just another network. We have hundreds of networks right now. Just L2s, like Paul, you are not correct. Like there are over 50. There are over 100 L2s that we currently list on L2Bit, and these are only the ones that are already launched on mainnet. Including the upcoming, it will be probably over 200 already. So a lot of things is happening. There is a lot of experimentation, and that's the beauty of Ethereum. Like, I try not to dismiss Ethereum competitors. I have a huge respect to other ecosystems that are out there. But when we think about Ethereum, you have to think about it. It's like 10 years of building stuff, 10 years of failing, 10 years of coming back and trying again, this time maybe correctly. This is the head start that is really hard to catch up. And especially when thinking about enterprise adoption. Like I remember 5 years ago when I was discussing with a lot of institutions about how can they use blockchain. They were saying, hey, we don't want this public blockchain because we can't really do it. But how about we create our own private blockchain, our own private network? And they all went into Hyperledger Fabric. And suddenly, 5 years after that, we are not speaking, like, there are not so many conferences about Hyperledger Fabric deployments. Like, even IBM itself disbanded the whole division after closing the last deal. Because actually private blockchains don't make much sense. Like, we are here. We are talking about blockchain simply because Ethereum and Bitcoin, because of the value that was created there, because of the experimentation that was created there. But if you want to understand really what's interesting in it, you need to get your hands dirty. You need to go there, install a wallet, onboard some funds, bridge it, go into Aave, deploy some money into Aave, deploy some money into Spark, deploy some money into Morpho. Check what are the differences between Ethereum and Arbitrum. What is the ecosystem in Arbitrum? Why do we say that Arbitrum has the DeFi ecosystem? What is Superchain? What does it mean that Optimism is building the superchain of chains, including Base, Kraken, Unichain, World, and many others? Like, there is so much more into this than just saying, hey, ETH is down 10% this week. This is missing a point so much that I'm terrified that simply, people in traditional finance are simply not just late to the herd. Like they don't even see the herd anymore. Like the herd is already way long gone, and only the dust is up there in the horizon. So if I can suggest one thing, if I can, just give you a hint. Really, drop your weekend plans and go learn about Ethereum and its broader ecosystem. Learn about Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync, Plume, all the others. Go to l2bit.com and you will see a list of chains that you need to catch up. Because there are hundreds of teams that are building on top of Ethereum ecosystem and have been building for the last 6, 7, 8 years to disrupt your businesses.
Thank you, Christoph. So we're going to get to Q&A, and it's going to be very interesting, but I want to give a chance to Igor to kind of introduce himself and to talk a little bit about kind of the perspective that he has, because Gateway is interesting. It's a little bit different than some of the others here. They're not an L2. They're not a monitor of the L2 ecosystem. They're a service provider. And so you see you provide kind of API services or and other kind of services to people that want to either start their own L2, right? You are one of the reasons why there are over 200, but also to access, to use, to make this process simple. So you get this incredibly wide perspective. Talk to us about kind of what does Gateway FM do, and also what kind of insights do you have from at the ecosystem level about how people are using this technology?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, Paul. Like one more number that might be interesting, like we thought about mainnets, testnets, these are already serious projects, but how many people tried an L2 as builders? So on our platform alone, we have like 3,000 or something DevNet deployed, or almost 4,000 already. Of course, not everybody will come to mainnet eventually, but just to see the amount of people who are interested in trying with this as a builder, that just very much reinforces what you said before. One more note, because I'm a technical officer, so I have a bleeding edge tech here. But Gateway is actually 4 years old today. So I think a lot of people. Thank you.
That's an important milestone. When you're a small business, that is a huge milestone.
I think a lot of people thought that it's a good idea to change their career on the 1st of April for some reason. And I'm myself coming before that from the Ethereum Foundation. Actually, me and my co-founders were both competitors in the Ethereum Foundation. Like Pradeep was from Nethermind, building one of the clients, and I was from Aragon. So we're competitors now coming together to work. And I wanted to say a little bit about the history of how it came together. Basically, initially, like L2s weren't on the roadmap at all. The idea was directly to just scale Ethereum. Ethereum should have thousands of transactions per second. It should be enough for everybody. But then, Ethereum Foundation, they made this plan. I think it was called Project Serenity or something like that back then. Huge plan about sharding and how everything gonna work together and stuff. And they started implementing this. And 3 years down the line, when they just finishing the first part, the most basic part, which wasn't basic technical, the beacon chain, they figured out that if they continue building it like this, it's gonna take them decades to scale. So then there was this post that we wanted this. Basically, we wanna outsource, if you want. We wanna build an ecosystem of L2 or rollups. Back then there was just rollups to third-party companies, to give them grants and whatnot to create this scalability systems. And that's, I don't remember, it was around 2019 or something like this when it happened. And then again, there were two directions that started. One is for optimistic rollups and another is for ZK rollups. I myself more interested in the ZK rollups. They're more difficult, but I think there's more towards the future. And the first ZK rollup actually that we worked at Gateway with was Stark X, if somebody remembers that from Stark, it was 2021. We actually integrated it into Opera browser for the cheaper transfers. It was a major success. I think we got 4,000 transactions a month or something. But it's then we started with Gnosis Pay. Gnosis, one of the basically there used to be sidechain. Now it's L1 in and of itself. And they started to build Optimism on top of their chain to provide payments, like a payment solution. That was in 23. Then we launched our the one that's roll-up as a service solution in August of 23 as well. And one more thing that we spoke about Hyperledger before. Actually, in the I think in March of 24, we did the first migration from the Hyperledger into NL2, which was pretty cool. So again, for those who stuck with Hyperledger and doesn't like it anymore, you can switch to a better tech without losing all the data, which is also very cool. And now we are also starting to contribute to the full stack, to basically Polygon ZK EVM stack, to move it forward. And basically, I think we are reaching right now a spot, and we see this with a lot of technologies, that first maybe it's very difficult to get servers. So maybe you get one server, and the whole system that you're building, it fits on a single server or something like this. Then it becomes with virtual machines easier, and suddenly you have microservices. You have 50 microservices, 100 microservices running. I see the same with the L2s. It used to be a very, very complicated thing to run an L2. It wasn't ready. Basically, if you look at L2 before, they published the source code, but to run it really, between having a source code and being able to stably run it, is a huge gap there. Right now, it's much, much easier. And of course, we are feeling right now the fragmentation issues that are being solved at the moment. And if the fragmentation solved, right now we have 50, 100, then 200 L2s. Maybe we'll have many L2s that there will be, I would say, public with their own tweaks. And since the technology on how to, basically the different teams that are working on solving the fragmentation, like Polygon with the AG layer, Caldera with something else, Arbitrum is working, Superchain from Optimism, all these things are trying to merge them into a single ecosystem back together. And when that happens, basically you might as well have your own L2 if you want, because as soon as the demand becomes, as soon as thing becomes a commodity, basically and easy to and very stable to get, then people will find how to use it. Because before we're thinking, oh, maybe all these transactions are coming on chain. Later, okay, maybe in game we want to actually do like one of our customers, oh, you have this throughput. Oh, maybe we'll put not only just like in-game shop on L2, but we put like basically all the major in-game events on L2. Maybe later it's going to be even more and more. So it makes kind of a lot of sense. Right now, we're also at a very interesting situation. Not everything is great at that, especially with enterprises, with L2. So the parts that are really, at least that I see that really not good yet, one thing is wallets and how they work in the multi-chain world. They really needs to be rethinked, because right now it's very difficult even for me, like as a person who wasn't in the blockchain professionally since 2017, sometimes to figure out where my assets are and how and what, and it's very difficult for normal people. The same comes with account abstraction. Again, these problems are getting worked at. Account abstraction, because basically from getting into, let's say you have your account like at Microsoft, or you have your account at EY or something, and getting from there to on-chain, there is a gap there as well, but they are being worked on. And of course, more things, again, we get legislative clarity right now, but I will not talk about this, because it was said a lot. We also working quite a lot at Gateway and others. They're working on the compliance of different kinds for L2s, security, other type of compliance. And I think that's where we're heading into if things go that way. Thanks so much.
Okay, so I'm going to start some of the questions with you because you mentioned, you've got already like 3,000 test nets. Back in November, I was talking to Vitalik. We had like a panel on stage in Bangkok, and Vitalik said in response to one of my questions, well, every company can have their own L2. And I feel like this kind of defeats the purpose of having a blockchain. I thought the purpose of having a blockchain is a shared space where you can interact with other business partners. So I think this idea that every company could have their own L2 is silly. And explain to me why you and Vitalik are right and I am wrong, keeping in mind that this is my event. I'm the host. And I have a very thin skin.
Yeah, that's a good question. But basically, like we can look at from different perspective. Like why the company might want their own L2 at first is the same reason why the company used to want their own private blockchain, even though they are not the same. Like that's a very important thing, because they might again tweak it somehow how they want to some extent. They also might not want to be disturbed by the others. You don't want a success of your competitor to basically stop you from working, right? Because if you are the shared space, if anybody was in the Ethereum space in 2018, I think, when there was CryptoKitties and everybody bred cats online, like it was impossible to use like blockchain for anything. Like it was waiting. So you don't want that to happen because, I don't know, FIFA went and started like basically have live events on chain or something like this. Your company to stop working. Another thing why you want a blockchain in general as a company, why would you want it at all? Like you have plenty of kind of legacy technologies, and the new hype is AI, right? So nobody is talking about blockchain. But with AI, it's also very important that a lot of the companies will become more and more like API driven, or become APIs, like company as an API basically. Right now we have this MCP standard for AI agents and whatnot. So your company being able to expose standardized open API to other companies is very, very important. Again, that's why you want a blockchain. Like, why would you want an L2 in particular? It's exactly what you, Paul, said, that because you don't want to be alone. You don't want just a blockchain for yourself without anything and hidden. Because if you have an L2 is called layer 2 for a reason. It's heavily linked to Ethereum. And with that, you're getting nice thing. Yeah, everything within your L2 can be fast and cheap, which is fine and very quick. Everything within, let's say, between you and everything that's happening on Ethereum is just one bridge transaction away, and bridges are getting better and better, and timings are less and prices are cheaper. And Ethereum is working more and more towards to make it better, basically, with more blobs, with recent updates and yada yada yada. So basically, you have very efficient and high throughput blockchain inside your company. You might have also a privacy solution on top of that for things that are hidden. And I think that the privacy solution should not only be public versus private, but there should be also different kind of layers of access even within the company. Maybe a CEO should see more than the employee. And maybe this thing will go slightly away again with culture, because we see that organizations tend to, from the blockchain, just an organizational structure, become a bit more open, like open about processes, open about workbooks. So maybe this private space would be a bit less with time and public more. But you start with a fairly like public heavy, private heavy, sorry, L2. And then basically you connect to other organizations basically through the bridge. And if this bridge is like protected by, let's say, ZK, which is like a pretty good technology in terms of the security and quantum resistance and even privacy preventing, then again, you're just basically a single Ethereum time transactions away from getting, let's say, oh, I want to get a KYC from that organization. So yeah, that's
Can I also relate to that? So, like, I've been asked this question a lot. Like, do we need those many L2s? Like, do we need 200 L2s? And I said that yes, like, we need probably thousands of L2s. And why? Like, for me, the good analogy would be VPNs and private networks. You know, back in the late 90s, everybody was building their own networks, intranets. You know, these were the cool thing. Like, companies were laying cables across the city between their headquarters. But like, and this was insane. And the same goes to L1s. Like, you know, there is no reason to reinvent the wheel, and there is no reason to you know, build your own L1, your own network, your own protocol. But there are reasons why you might want to have your own private space, your own customized solution, something that is, you know, bespoke to your needs. And this could be an L2. And the same way as we are building right now VPNs over internet, that we don't lay cables, we use the network that works and that you know, is valuable because of the common like network effects of everybody using it. The same way you want to build an L2 on top of Ethereum, which is an internet kind of thing in the crypto world. So you might want to build an L2 to have something private, as you mentioned, to have something customized, to simply have your own data that you control and you decide whether it works or not, and you can maintain it yourself. There are many reasons why you might want to build your own network, and you might want to bring your own users to your own network. But you still want to have this common layer that binds all the networks together and that lets you focus on the things that are important for you, on your business needs, and not necessarily on the network layer. That's why L2s built on top of Ethereum make sense, while building your own network customized from scratch probably doesn't.
Okay, so you're sort of partially a little bit convincing me, but not entirely. And I'll take two different pieces of this in turn. So on the not convincing me at all category, you lay out a lot of theoretical reasons why people might want an L2, but you're not able to cite, and no one can as far as I can tell, a specific business problem that gets solved by having your own L2. These are, so far, these are sort of theoretical interests, not specific ones. On the other hand, there is a kind of a bit of a category of stuff which is potentially interesting. So several years ago, this is ancient EY history, this is one of the things that we didn't turn out well, we learned from and sort of moved on, but now it's making, the conversation is making me think about this. Several years ago, we built a solution called Ops Chain Intra Company. And the idea was that you could use a blockchain infrastructure inside your own enterprise to start to integrate across systems. You could keep track of money, you could build your own kind of tools and smart contracts. And this went nowhere, and it got no takers. And I think the reason it got no takers is that blockchains, in there are two issues. First of all, there really isn't a deeply compelling business need for a private blockchain, especially one inside your own company. The reality is that building a blockchain solution inside your own company is almost certainly a more complex, more expensive way to solve a problem than most other traditional means. However, one thing that we did talk to several clients about is like, they said, well, is there a circumstance in the future where this might be interesting? And my hypothesis at the time was that the circumstance in the future that might be interesting is, let's imagine that in the future, you start to do most of your commerce on-chain with external business partners. When that happens, what's going on is that you're making a widget, you're processing that internally, right? Think about somebody like an airplane engine manufacturer. They're going to take a part from Ohio and they're going to send it for final assembly in the UK, which is then going to be delivered to an airline in Canada, right? You have a lot of stuff going on internally. If you start and finish with a fully tokenized internal model of your business based on smart contracts, then delivering that tokenized asset to the end customer and getting paid as part of a smart contract could actually be a smart thing to do, right? So that if the future of your business is that on-chain is the true kind of mothership, it's the home of all, it's the final it's the final system of record for your inter-company, between company transactions, then it makes sense to think about an extension of that blockchain on your own private terms as an intra within your company final layer of truth as well. So potentially this integration of on-chain and off-chain will just eventually just become different flavors of on-chain inside of large enterprises. So I am not conceding defeat on this point, but I'm accepting the possibility that there may be changes. Let me ask a follow-on question here. Christoph, I personally, this is one of my hypotheses, that we don't need 50, never mind 200 or 3,000 general purpose layer 2 networks. I would love you to talk a little bit about sort of, are we starting to see some differentiation between the different layer 2 networks, right? One of the reasons I really wanted to have Teddy here is I think of Plume as a really good example of a L2 network that is not trying to be everything to everyone. They've got a specific focus, which is real-world assets. Is this something that is spreading? Like, what is the future? Because there's just no way there's demand for 100 general-purpose L2 networks.
So from my perspective, there are two different things. One is the technological stacks. And do we need 200 different general purpose technological stacks? Probably not. Because there is no value in, okay, there is some marginal value in innovation when we customize something. Like we take, let's say, Arbitrum stack and customize it as Kinto did, adding some KYC layer on the sequential level. This is a customization that they found some use case for it, and it makes sense. But they took something that was already built and maintained. But do we need 200 blockchains in general? I would say, do we need 200 general purpose banks that offer just deposits and transfers? Apparently we do. Apparently we do need them, because those banks at the end interact with customers, interact with companies, and interact with people, and they address concrete people and concrete customers in their different ways. There is a reason why I probably have a different bank account than you have. I have probably 7 of them in 7 different banks. You probably have it as well, because all of them, they solve different things for us.
But those then represent some level of specialization, right? And banking is a good example.
Exactly.
There are banks that specialize on, loans. There are banks that are sort of retail banking things only, right? That's a pretty typical process. So, right now we have a few general purpose ones like Arbitrum and Base that are just designed. They're sort of broadcasting everybody can do everything here. At least that's what it seems like. You're about.
Yeah, but it's not entirely. So okay, they are similar, but they are not entirely the same. Base has a very specific context. It's a Coinbase chain. And it's an L2 built on top of Optimism, part of the superchain. While Arbitrum is building their own stack that is DeFi focused. This is something that they were very early. They built it very early, and this is their context. They are also right now heavily investing in gaming, for example. They will be doing a lot of different stuff that I probably am not able to reveal here, but each of them are finding their own niches and address their own niches. The same goes with the case saying that has private validiums that can, if you want to have an institutional adoption where you want to have your private data, but you want a link, permissionless link with the liquidity on the public networks, you can have a private validium that will settle on Ethereum and allow for permissionless bridging, but you will not reveal any data of yours. You will not reveal, for example, movements on your network. So customization is the key. And yes, finding the niche, finding the reason, and addressing specific target bases is the key to the future, in my opinion.
I have a little bit to add because the important thing here that's we have basically stacks. Stacks are getting standardized. They becoming commoditized. And do we need to differentiate the stacks? Probably as needed as different, if you travel a lot, different sockets. You very differentiation of sockets in your hotel rooms, especially if you forgot the world adapter. But then on top of the stacks, there's something that's key to this chain. So if the chain is basically specialized, it means that they build something on top of this stack. It might be software, it might be relationship, it might be compliance, it might be licenses or whatnot. But this part is becoming the key. So companies like ours, for instance, we care for we help you with the standardized part to make sure that it's done as production ready as quickly as possible. But then you focus on this part, and I think exactly we don't need 200. Just stacks, just deploy 200 stacks and be done with it. That's not going to work. But if each one tackles a certain problem, which makes it's on top of that, then it makes sense.
Okay, so let's go from generic to specific. Teddy, what
Yeah.
does Plume actually do that's unique and specific?
Right, yeah. So I actually have a lot of thoughts on this topic, obviously. So, I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, I used to work at a generic L1. And to be honest, when you're at a general purpose or general L1, you're honestly onboarding every single project you can possibly find, whether it's in the DeFi space, SocialFi, GameFi, whatever really kind of helps, honestly, pump their bags, quote unquote, is what these chains go after, right? The difference with them and us is that we've stayed true to our mission from day one. We saw that the RWA space was honestly growing tremendously at a very fast pace, but there was never a single home for all these assets, right? All these different RWA projects were on Solana, they're on Base, BNB chain, Avalanche. And when you're scattered across all these different chains, it's really hard to give the right support for these types of projects to really grow. So at Plume, the reason why we have, and today I think we have a little bit over 200 projects signed to work with us, on our testnet. We had 18 million wallets, 4 million that were unique. Our mainnet's going live early Q2, and we'll be rolling out our mainnet in phases so that people can kind of see the different types of assets. But the reason why that these projects and these DeFi protocols have chosen to work with us is because we tackle a lot of issues that they have on the technology and product side, but also on the go-to-market side, we've built a community and an ecosystem, really have literally every single resource geared towards growing the sector. And because of that, over the last, we started the company in January 2024, and ever since then, it's been amazing to see all the growth that we've kind of experienced from all these different, builders wanting to, build on us, to deploy with us, to build, and grow with our ecosystem. And I think that in order to really, grow a single vertical, you need to have the right resources to do so. And at a generic, L1 or L2, it's very hard to find that type of tooling. So, like I mentioned earlier, I can give you an example. One of our main products is Plume Arc, which is a workflow tokenization engine that kind of helps people tokenize. I think the main customer for this asset is someone who understands the benefits of tokenization, but doesn't understand how to tokenize anything, doesn't understand anything about the Web3 or blockchain space. So there's a specific project we have out in Texas where we actually found them very upstream. Actually, they found us. They found us very upstream where they had an asset, they had an idea, they had no idea how to bring it on chain. Not only did we help them bring that asset on chain, but we helped them kind of grow their Twitter brand, grow their Discord. At the end of the day, you're building on crypto rails, and you need to approach the market from a very crypto native perspective, right? But these people were very TradFi. So we helped them with these different go-to-market strategies. We built their brand up a bit, and now that their brand is a little bit larger, we've been, out in Asia and with our different capital providers, essentially looking for different demand to come into these assets. So we helped build the product. Now we're helping with the distribution piece. And the third step, which we're seeing a lot actually right now, is really implementing the DeFi side for these types of assets. Like imagine taking a static asset and making it more dynamic, like collateralizing your home, collateralizing stocks, whatever asset it is, and borrowing stable coins against it to then deposit into another RWA, real world asset, or into another perp dex to continue trading. What we've really created is this ecosystem where all of this can kind of flourish together. So for this specific project, the next step right now is really taking its assets and implementing it on the DeFi side. And I think the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because our chain started very retail and DeFi community oriented in the beginning, but over the last 6 to 8 months, ever since our Series A fundraise, we had a lot of institutional investors come in like Brevin Howard, Galaxy Digital, Han Ventures, and from there, what we realize is, a lot of enterprise/institutional type folks in the space are looking for ways to actually distribute their product more. And when they go to these more general chains, they actually told me this word for word, they had to go and win over the DAO specifically, right? They had to go win over the foundation, really get them to accept their project, and then after that, they had to go to every single DeFi protocol and ask them to take their asset as collateral on that for that specific product. Versus when they came to us, we've been building the chain from ground zero to today. We know all of our builders, and since our product is geared only for real-world assets, especially on the DeFi side, we call it RWA-Fi, it's very easy for these types of other DeFi builders and founders to just accept a more institutional type assets collateral versus like when you're on another chain, it's kind of a newer concept to them. What I really saw was, over the last, few years since I started looking to RWAs in 2021 at Coinbase till now is, there's been a lot of evolution in space, but it took a lot of education. And I feel like now we're almost at that inflection point where people are really starting to understand, with Larry Fink tokenizing his money market fund on chain and all these institutions in New York, I'm based in New York, looking to move their assets onto permissionless rails. It's honestly is a very exciting time. And all of them right now, they're getting away from the traditional mindset of having a permission chain that's more of a black box, because they realize that once assets are tokenized there, they're kind of shut off from the rest of the crypto ecosystem. What they're really looking for is a way to access the rest of the global economy on-chain and really grow the on-chain GDP. And I think that's why building a chain that really tackles all of these different issues at the core has really been super helpful for the RWA space. And that's how we've gotten so many builders to date.
So you actually really, you brought home a point that was made earlier in the day by Professor Angel, which is finance is a branch of marketing, right? And it's kind of interesting because up until this point, I have tended to assume that there are significant limitations in the level of differentiation that's possible in an L2, because at the end of the day, a token that's created on Plume has to be able to be bridgeable to any other part of the Ethereum ecosystem. So there are limitations. You can do lots of cool stuff around the marketing, the community, the other services that are available, but what you cannot do is create something that's so highly customized that it becomes immobile and stranded inside of your ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a good point. And sorry, I thought you were gonna you had a follow-up, but I guess to address that, we've actually been building, because we've been thinking about, how do we become the true hub for RWAs and really distribute uncorrelated yield to the rest of the ecosystem. I mean, I think you guys have seen, with the rise of all these different shit coins and everything that's been going on, like presidents rugging their, their citizens with different meme coins. There's been a shift towards more fundamentals. And what we've been actually building, I don't know if you've actually seen this, Paul, is a product called Skylink, which is kind of a joint venture that we're building with the Layer 0 team, which I'm sure you guys know the Layer 0 team, they're a cross-chain, bridging solution. But essentially, what we've done is created a product to help us, Plume, be the origin of all of these different yield products, and then we can actually bridge out a representation to all of our partner chains. So we actually announced this product a few months ago with Solana and other different blockchains, and the idea is if you're on the destination chain and you want access to maybe something like treasuries on Plume, private credit, to even something as esoteric as durian farms or solar farms, we're seeing every type of asset pop up on Plume. You actually wouldn't need to bridge to Plume. Exactly. What you could do is actually invest in a representation of the yield of the asset on that destination chain. And when you redeem the asset, what we would do on our side is actually bridge the yield, which is essentially stablecoins, back to the holder on these different chains. So we've been thinking about how to really create this RWA hub and bring it to the rest of the ecosystem. And I think that is where the true value is. Because like you guys have been saying, there's so many different L2s, so many different L1s, so many different L3s, right? And a lot of them have been asking us, can we get exposure to these assets in a compliant way? And this is the most compliant way, as opposed to, going back to the issuer and reissuing the token. There's a little bit more compliance things to deal with and from that sense, but if you can really, work with the true DeFi products and crypto products on chain, there's a lot to achieve, especially when you're trying to go multi-chain.
Thank you. So Igor, I've got a bit of I'm going to switch tracks a little bit here because I want to talk about how adoption and usage have changed over the last, I want to say, call it a year, right? So I think about this last year as really, really revolutionary. We started, a year ago, a little bit at this point now, but a bit more than a year ago, and we got ETFs. First the Bitcoin ETF, then the Ethereum ETF. Then we got MiCA implementation in June of last year. Then we had the U.S. election. Then we had the privacy ruling in December. Right, the world has changed kind of enormously in the last 12 months. What have you seen in terms of usage, particularly by enterprise users and others who you're providing this gateway access, right? You're making it easy for people to spin up, as you mentioned, something like 3,000 of these. What's changed in the last year? What are the patterns and trends that you are seeing taking shape?
Yeah, of course, first thing that's to notice is of course, AI-related stuff is always popping up, like companies that are trying to build any kind of decentralize something related to AI, usually around payments for AI, payments for training or something like this. This started popping up, of course, last year. One more thing that we noticed is a lot of payment solutions are coming up. Everybody is releasing their own cards. So there are a few on our platform. There's much more coming. And it's, I think, a very cool building block. So it's much easier right now for a company to just, again, with a very light licensing and something just to release a credit card that's connected directly to on-chain access. I think we also see much more kind of interest right now into, and the question sounds sometimes like, how do I get exposed to digital assets safely? This is a general question that we get from quite a few of them. So this is, I think, the trend. And of course, gaming was always the big one. Now it's even bigger, and it looks like that with L2s and when kind of they see the capacity of L2s, they just want to do much more on-chain for gaming.
When you say gaming, are you talking about gambling, or are you talking about just entertainment games?
Entertainment games, kind of typically the ones that have some items in them, and sometimes right now even there are events in the games, for instance, right? And for events in the games, they are sort of starting from, selling ad space in the events in the games to just kind of a live streaming important data from that's you typically do from sports matches or something. Before it was just streams of data, like Twitter used to provide things like that, right? So now they're being sent on chain because the capacity is there.
Excellent, thank you. So, Christoph, I want to go to you. So, one of the sort of typical weekly occurrences on Twitter is that there will be some kind of somebody will announce the death of Ethereum, and this happens each week, and it's been killed so many times I've kind of lost track. You've got this view over kind of the L1 plus all the L2s, right? If somebody said to you, tell me, how healthy is the Ethereum ecosystem? How would you answer that question? What are the metrics? What are the key things that you would point to that give some indicator of the health of the overall ecosystem?
It's a challenging question, but I would say that something that definitely would show you the health of the ecosystem is the number of people building on this ecosystem. And if you sum up the number of people, if you look into Ethereum, you've got the Ethereum, the mainnet, and people building for 10 years on Ethereum mainnet. And it's not just like people, like we have tools, we have tooling, we have, auditing companies, we have people who simply understand this technology. Then we have this compounded with every big L2. Because like if you take Ethereum on all the builders building on top of Ethereum, and then you go to Arbitrum, you've got a kind of like a copy of this ecosystem with hundreds, if not thousands of builders building there. And then you go to ZK Sync and you have the same thing. You go to Optimism and have the same thing. And then you have also other L2s like Teddy mentioned that Plume is facilitating their own builder ecosystem. And they're all building on top of Ethereum. Because at the end, all those ecosystems are very interesting because Ethereum is securing them. Because if they ever, if they implement proper security guarantees, then you can be sure that if ever they go down, then Ethereum will allow you to recover the funds. That's something that, let me add a bit of spice to that. That's why I don't necessarily like those constructions that you mentioned that, layer 0 based tokens that span across Ethereum, Solana, and all those different other ecosystems. Because this means that, of course, it's great because this is what users need, this is what users want. But at some point, this is also a compounded risk that comes with such construction. This is something that we internally at L2Beat are pretty terrified how lightly we tend to take the risks with those super complicated constructions, because with Ethereum and L2s on top of Ethereums, it's kind of, it's not simple, but at least it's simple-ish, that Ethereum secures L2, so whenever L2 goes down, there is a permissionless way of, or at least it is supposed to be, you have to check at l2beat.com if actually this is provided, but there should be a permissionless way of getting your funds back to Ethereum. If you've got this construction, when you have dozens of networks and, and inter-chain frameworks on top of it, you take so many different assumptions about like what has to work and keep working in order for your assets to be safe. Because what happens if this, if this cross-chain infrastructure gets corrupted in some way? What happens if any single chain in this network of chains gets corrupted and the value starts leaking in this chain? Like, what is exactly the asset risk assessment on such a complicated structure? That's why, I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with it. I understand where is it coming from. I had a long debate with Layer 0 2 years ago about the risk assumption and how to assess the risk in those constructions. But something that has to be known is that you have to take into account this risk. You have to, especially if you are deploying your assets on chain, do understand what exactly are you doing. I know that there are people who want to tokenize stuff but not understand what exactly tokenization means. I would say that at least right now, we are not in the situation where I would advise for that. I would advise rather seeking knowledge and understanding the risks that are involved with such constructions.
So first of all, can I just say, amazing job of not answering the question. You are ready for politics, right? So one of the first things they teach you at EY when you do media training is you don't have to answer the question, right? You can just segue to whatever you want. So well done. I do want to pile on around this risk management thing. This is a big issue. And it comes up every time blockchain is going through an upcycle. People are like, oh my gosh, I want to work on this chain and this chain and this chain. And when I talk to my EY colleagues in audit, when we think about what is required to add a chain to the ones that we audit and do so kind of at a systematic level and with confidence, the answer is it's not trivial. We spend a significant amount of time, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per chain, for which, if we have a client that has doing assets on that chain, right? And it is not a trivial amount of money, and you have to keep up with it. And you have to think carefully about the risks. Every time a chain does a hard fork, you need to reevaluate what are the associated risks, what are the technical issues. I think when the market is going up, people get very enthusiastic about what the future looks like, and they think that they can sort of bear any cost burden for a significant period of time. But my own personal opinion is that when you take into account the regulatory risks, the regulatory complexity, and the recurring costs of keeping on top of a new chain, it's not trivial. And so the ability to be on a single large ecosystem like Ethereum, which is deeply and fundamentally secured, is actually really, really valuable. I'm going to take one question from the online Q&A before I give people a chance to do kind of their closing comments. This question is going to sound very theoretical, but I'm going to boil it back down. It says, if dank sharding and EIP 4844, see, everybody understands what I'm talking about, significantly reduce Ethereum fees, will L2s still be relevant? So what the question is talking about is that there's a kind of a TikTok model going on in the Ethereum ecosystem. So for several years, and I think, Christoph, somebody did a beautiful job of explaining this, right? For several years, there was this process going on inside of Ethereum where we tried to scale the core network just by itself, and we realized that wasn't going to work. So then we pivoted to L2s, and L2s have spectacularly succeeded. And I talked about this in my opening keynote. We literally, over a period of several years, went from a maximum daily capacity of about 1 million transactions a day to what is today a theoretical capacity of 345 billion transactions a day. And I say it's theoretical because we don't have 345 billion transactions worth of stuff to test it on, right? And of course, as you know, when transaction prices are a function of supply and demand, and the supply is 345 billion, and the demand is in the tens or hundreds of millions at most per day, the market clearing price is going to be awfully low. We are now, even though this immense amount of capacity has been created, we are now going back to a kind of back to this other version, which is how do we scale Ethereum natively, right? And so there will be another round of scaling that goes on in terms of Ethereum's native infrastructure with these initiatives, particularly dank sharding. And that will further multiply the capacity of the Ethereum network, and specifically the base layer, which is the mainnet. And that is the layer on which still about 50% of all of Ethereum's, 50% of the entire non-Bitcoin asset world exists, and is a very high percentage of the Ethereum total. So it's a TikTok. My own hypothesis is that transaction capacity, like CPU memory, CPU speeds, and the computer memory, is something that if you build it, people will use it. It will take time, right? We kind of go through these leapfrog models, right? Where we get to this point where you're like, I'm very old. I can remember people saying you will never need more than 640 kilobytes of RAM, right? Now you'd be lucky to open a window with 640 kilobytes of RAM left, right? You'd be closing all the windows that say, warning, you have no RAM left. So this capacity is going to get built. It will get used, right? When we think about what it takes, think about, just to give you an example of tariffs that are being implemented, right? To calculate national content in a car, you have to look at the origin of every part in the car. The best way to keep track of every part in every car is to tokenize it, right? I can think of quite a few things that might be happening tomorrow that will drive demand for tokenization at an incredibly granular level to an extraordinary high. We get the lightning round to close, which is, future of Ethereum. How many more times will it be predicted that Ethereum dies before we are over? And we'll start with Teddy, and then we'll go to Igor and Christoph.
That's a good question. I feel like crypto Twitter people are pretty psychotic, so probably a few more dozen times. Yeah. But in my honest opinion, Ethereum is definitely here to stay. All the institutions that we work with, on the tokenization side, they're already super comfortable with the base layer. They're bringing all their money market funds, every asset onto Ethereum. So kind of branching off of that, it's probably not actually dying anytime soon.
I wanted to add to this question a little bit of technicality. Technically, neither of these...
1 minute and 33 seconds.
Neither of these are actually scaling Ethereum's transactional capacity. They're scaling capacity of L2s on Ethereum. So L2s will be relevant but more capable with these changes. But Ethereum capacity for normal transactions will not change. how many times more? I don't know. There's a couple of times a day of like our cryptocurrency or our Ethereum or something. So yeah, I think it's a long time, because as soon as the tech becomes boring, this hype cycle dries out, then at some point will be basically Ethereum will be predicted to death until nobody will talk about it anymore because it's a matter of fact.
And for me, the fact that people are complaining that Ethereum is dying is simply a proof that Ethereum is well and alive and is thriving. Nobody cares if EOS is dying. Nobody cares. Nobody checks if EOS is dying, because there is no one who cares about EOS. And Ethereum is doing good. Ethereum is is winning right now and is on a good way to become the financial backbone of the future financial system. And people will be claiming that it's dying every other day, but does it matter?
I love that you said another chain is nobody cares about them. When I took over the job as the chairman of the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, I promised that I would be more diplomatic and I would stop trash talking other blockchains. So I never refer to them by name. And in fact, I've learned the hard lesson that if you do that, somebody from that blockchain will try to track down the chairman of EY at their weekend house and specifically complain about me. And I feel like that is more trouble than it's worth, and always causes issues.
In my case, people can complain to Bartek and Peter at L2Beat like all day long.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of day one.